take you back to the Freedom Park Heritage Site and Museum in Pretoria, where families have been performing rituals for their loved ones whose remains have been repatriated decades after they died in exile. Newzroom Afrika's Ziyanda Ngcobo joins us live from there with the latest. We see that some of the speakers of the main program today already having arrived, Ziyanda.
That's right, and at this present moment, preparations are well underway, and we've just gotten information that where our colleague Aldrin St-Pierre is, the cortege is preparing to leave. But for now, here on the hill, we're going to bring in Arts and Culture Deputy Director General Vusthemba Ndima to talk about how you, as the custodian, in essence, of this repatriation process, the significance of today, not only for the families, but for the history of this country as a department that also deals, by and large, with the heritage of South Africa.
Thank you very much, Ziyanda. Yeah, well, yes, indeed. It's a very important day for us. Of course, it has got mixed feelings, sadness, joy. Sadness in the sense that it takes us back to the history of this country with all the atrocities of the past. And you know that for many years, families have been saying they want their loved one to come back and be buried at home. So that dream, at least, has been fulfilled. More particularly for those who are in Zambia and Zimbabwe, is the launch, because there are still other countries that we still need to consider. So it is very important because it also triggers a discussion about relationships in this country. It triggers discussions about nation building, social cohesion. And it also begins to say to the young ones, it should say never again. As we tell the stories of atrocities, the current generation must then be able to say, this will never happen in their lifetime. They will do whatever it takes not to do what the apartheid regime and oppression did to the people that were about here, because they left this country unceremoniously. Yeah. They left this country because they were being dehumanized. They were not being treated as the citizens of this country. They went out to fight for our freedom. They, of course, died outside this country. And we owe it to them to bring them back to South Africa so that they are buried here. And I must say that as a person who has also been part of this process, yes, emotionally and psychologically, it has had a serious impact, because going with families to the graves, families seeing the graves of their loved ones for the first time, you know, you could see them breaking down, but also seeing them appreciating what government is doing. You know, it happened in Lusaka, when we went to Lusaka, when we went to Livingstone, Harare, Bulawayo, the same story, the same kind of emotion you had to go through. So it's not an easy process, but it's a process that is necessary.
I'd like to jump in there, because that's exactly what I'd like you to unpack. So, of course, you've been working closely with, for an example, the Missing Persons Task Team. You were working with the Military and Defense and Veterans Department very closely. Just take us through the minute details. I mean, you're seeing this grave for the first time in Livingstone, in Lusaka, Bulawayo, and Harare. But now you have to remove the stones for those who actually received a hero's funeral in those respective countries. And that exhumation process is very difficult, because in essence, you are getting bones and whatever remains of that particular family member.
No, it was a very touching experience. And of course, the Missing Person Task Team has done a very good job. They started by doing research. They started marking graves, and they came back to us to say, look, these are the graves that we think we will be able to do the exhumation on. And yes, indeed, it did happen, and we were able to bring about 42 that are going to be, here today. 26 from Lusaka, and 16 from 26 from Lusaka and Livingstone. So it's like 7 in Livingstone and the rest of the number is Lusaka, which is the largest population.
Yeah.
And then in Zimbabwe, it's 15 in Bulawayo and 15 in Harare, 1 in Bulawayo.
At DGG, I want to jump in there because we haven't quite gotten the details of, for instance, we're told that there's still about 1,000 to 1,500 still out there in different parts of the continent. But for those who didn't have a tombstone, how did you know that Ziyanda Ngcobo is laying there in that particular spot, for an example?
That's a very important answer. You know, the cemetery records played a prominent role because the missing person task team worked very closely with those who are keeping the records in cemeteries. And of course, using current technologies, you know, looking at what you call it, coordinates.
Okay.
And then they were able to really just spot. And of course, oral history came to the fore because there are people in Zambia who are still alive, who knew where these people are. So it's a combination of approaches in terms of the method of identification of these graves. Oral history, cemetery records, you know, historical works and books that are there. And it was amazing, you know, if you look at when these graves were, when the bodies were exhumed, some of the relics that came out, you know, like the scarf in terms of Dumanogwe, in the grave of Basil February in Bulawayo, Athlone, and you also saw when we just when the team had just exhumed the remains, then they saw, you know, the Nom de Guerre, Paul Peterson.
Yes.
Exactly, we knew that was Basil February. So it has been a very emotional and very learning curve for all of us in terms of the work that is being done by the Missing Persons Task Team.
Very important to work there. That's Vusitemba Ndima. He's the Deputy Director General in the Arts and Culture Department. Just the level of detail and tracking and tracing that would have had to have been undertaken, and perhaps also the counseling before the actual exhumations, because understanding that you're only fetching remains from these respective countries, the start of a process that's yet to continue in other countries like Angola, Uganda, Mozambique, to name but a few.
Ziyanda Ngcobo, they're speaking to us live from Freedom Park. We were watching that homecoming ceremony kicking off. And here in studio,